At Walgreens, we know flu season can feel a little chaotic. So we're going to give you our flu info
in a meditation, keeping you calm, just like a certified Walgreens pharmacist will do if you're a little needle nervous. So walk in or schedule an appointment, and Walgreens will handle the rest.
That's the human kind of help. Walgreens.
Vaccine subject to availability. State, age, and health-related restrictions may apply.
At Capella University, learning the right skills could make a difference. That's why our business programs teach you relevant skills you can take from the course room to the workplace. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Welcome to the quarter 3 2025 Eli Lilly earnings call recap. We have got a ton to get into, including Eli Lilly's announcement of a dual agonist peptide, a GLP-1 GIP, but this one is specially formulated not for obesity, not for diabetes, but will have the potential to change the lives of millions and millions of people. We're going to get into it on this special edition of On the Pen, the Weekly Dose podcast. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the On the Pen podcast with your host, Dave Knapp.
What an incredible earnings call this was for Eli Lilly. We're going to get into what it means for patients living with obesity. If you've ever stared down the prescription for Zepbound, looking at a $650 refill, wondering how that's affordable, this call might explain a little bit more why Eli Lilly is absolutely commanding a premium for their obesity drugs. They're not just making the drugs, they're building an entire ecosystem around the drugs that they're making, from Lilly Direct, direct-to-consumer pricing, to an oral option in orforglipron that could finally change the game for how patients access meaningful treatments in this country. So what we're going to do is we're going to break down what we learned from the Eli Lilly earnings call from the patient perspective, and we're going to give you a rundown on all the medications that were discussed. So let's talk a little bit about Eli Lilly's grip on this incretin market. So when we talk about incretins, we're simply talking about nutrient-stimulated hormones that have been basically manufactured to mimic hormones made in your body. And they are obviously the drugs that we know as Ozempic, Wegovy, Saxenda, Victoza, Trulicity, Mounjaro, Zepbound. And they're called incretin mimetics. And now 6 out of 10 incretin prescriptions in the U.S. belong to Eli Lilly. They have Eli Lilly's name on the pen. Zepbound, specifically the obesity treatment that came out a couple of years ago, tripled versus this time last year. So demand for Zepbound has tripled, and 40% of all new Zepbound prescriptions now come from Lilly Direct, the direct-to-consumer channel that they opened up when they released the vials, right? That was our big social media campaign that we started back in the spring of 2024. They eventually did release the vials and offered them at about 50% off of the list price for Zepbound, direct to patients, no insurance, no any middleman at all, just directly from Lilly, which spawned a whole movement within the pharmaceutical industry to change the way that people access medications in this country. So Lilly Direct continues to fire on all cylinders, and the demand, the 40% of all new Zepbound prescriptions are coming from that direct channel. That means patients are paying, at least for the therapeutic doses, $500 a month out of pocket for Zepbound. Just gives you a small idea of how effective this drug is for so many people. And that's up from 35% last quarter. Of course, just this week, we covered the fact that Lilly announced that they're partnering with Walmart to actually increase the reach of Lilly Zepbound vials direct to consumer. So Walmart will be adding those in the coming weeks here about mid-November. So you'll see that 40% of new prescriptions for Zepbound jump, maybe even 10% to 50% on the next earnings call. We'll have to see how it all shakes out. But Lilly is no longer fighting for market share. They're actually building an alternative healthcare system, a vertically integrated alternative healthcare system, one where, you could see very quickly where they set the price, control access, decide who pays what. It's an interesting time, and it'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out. But we want to get into the topic of orforglipron, because when people ask me, Dave, what is the next drug that you're excited about for obesity that will hit the market? My stock answer is usually, well, the next one, because the next one to hit the market usually going to offer something that's the current options available don't. And orforglipron, along with high dose Rybelsus, which will be oral Wegovy, those are two oral formulations that we can expect in the next 6 months or so. And so Lilly talked about orforglipron, which is their small molecule pill, goes up to 36 milligrams. Of course, they spent a lot of time talking about their clinical trial data that's been dropped over the last few months, and some future trial data that they're expecting to see. Of course, they are saying, hey, we reached our primary endpoint with orforglipron in terms of developing a pill that has similar efficacy to the injectable, like the older injectables like Wegovy and Ozempic. So some of the new interesting pieces of information, not all of it is exactly new, but maybe more contextual than we've had it in the past. The global obesity submissions for orforglipron are going to come before the end of 2025, which means that if Eli Lilly, which they confirmed in this earnings call that they're trying to exhaust every option to get orforglipron to the market as soon as possible. We learned that they've made over 1 billion doses of this already. I can't imagine that 1 billion doses of orforglipron can just sit on the shelf indefinitely. So I would imagine they're going to have a fire underneath them to get this to the market as soon as possible. Of course, the FDA has this new priority review voucher program, which will allow certain breakthrough drugs to be approved in as little as 2 months. And Dave Ricks, the CEO of Eli Lilly, on this earnings call did indicate that they plan to exhaust all the options, including this version of the priority review voucher, which could mean that we could have orforglipron as early as the first few months of 2026. So that's a big deal. Of course, they want to try to beat oral Wegovy to the market. So it'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out. I imagine Novo will be looking to do the same thing. But from a patient perspective, the question isn't when it's coming, it's how much will orforglipron cost, and will you be able to get it through Lilly Direct in the cash pay version? Now, one of the things that's interesting is Dave Ricks, the CEO of Eli Lilly, was recently on the All In podcast where he was asked, will they launch orforglipron at $100 and just make it accessible for everyone? And the answer that was given at that time was essentially that they didn't want to stifle innovation. If they brought orforglipron to the market, it's their position that it would stifle innovation, future innovation for drugs in the market. Now, I'm not sure exactly what the reasoning or the rationale is there, because I tend to disagree. Orforglipron is more of an entry-level GLP in terms of efficacy. It's just that it's available in a pill, so it's going to be a great option for a lot of people who are looking at maintenance, potentially. I think oral Wegovy, kind of the same thing, maintenance options. But for people with a tremendous amount of weight to lose, it's probably going to require the injectable versions. And so what does orforglipron do? Offering it at $100 a month just means that people would be able to maintain the weight loss that they got on the really expensive injections at a more affordable price point. And of course, there are clinical trials coming down the pike where they actually took folks from the Surmount trial that was testing oral injectable semaglutide versus injectable tirzepatide and allowing us to maintain their weight on orforglipron. And so we're going to get data on that sometime next year, and we're going to learn what is the outcome there. Were patients able to maintain? Now, one of the things that we learned in this earnings call is in that specific clinical trial, patients are actually on, some of them are on placebo, obviously, some of them are on orforglipron, but for patients who are on placebo who start to regain their weight at a rapid pace, orforglipron is going to be offered to those patients as a rescue medicine to preserve their weight loss. So I thought that was an interesting bone that they threw to the placebo arm, which is something that we talk about often on the pen, is when you look at these clinical trials, is it really humane to get somebody down to a healthier weight and then let their weight creep back up? So it's very interesting that Lilly has folded this into the way that they designed that clinical trial. But again, this all comes back to cost and what will it cost? And it sounds like Lilly's pretty clear that they plan to launch this through Lilly Direct and really working through the insurance channels as well. My hope is that it will be very reasonably priced, but I think given that it's novel in the sense that it's a GLP-1 small molecule, doesn't have quite the amount of rules and regulations to take the oral version of this GLP-1 like Wegovy does. Because of its small molecule nature, it doesn't get dissolved in the stomach by the stomach acid as easily as a peptide would. I think Lilly's going to see it as novel, and they're going to try to extract as much value as humanly possible. So where this price point lands, I don't know, but definitely not going to be $100 based upon what Dave Ricks said. So maybe $250, $300. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. And I hope that they do the right thing in the way that they price this, because I tend to disagree that it would stifle innovation to bring it to the market at $100. I think it would be wholly reasonable to do just that. So obviously, this could be a win for Access if they do bring it to the market at a reasonable price, or it could just be more of the duopoly on affordability that we've seen with Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk. Imagine that you'll see oral Wegovy and orforglipron priced very similarly. Would be interesting to see how it all shakes out. Of course, when you talk about Wegovy, to kind of go out a little bit on a rabbit trail, oral Wegovy going up to 25 milligrams daily. When you think about the amount of active pharmaceutical ingredient Novo Nordisk will have to make to put somebody on the oral version of Wegovy for a week, you think about 25 times 7. What's that? 175 milligrams a week versus the 2.4 milligrams of semaglutide a week in the injectable. The proposition for gobbling up manufacturing capacity to put people on the oral, I think, is a much more risky proposition to Novo Nordisk than it is to Eli Lilly. So perhaps you see oral Wegovy come in at a higher price point than orforglipron, just simply because orforglipron doesn't cut into the manufacturing of tirzepatide and some of their other peptides that they've got coming down the pike. The fact that they're able to do small molecule, that they just announced, what was it, a $2 billion plant that they're building to make orforglipron in Puerto Rico. You just see some really interesting dynamics unfold if you follow this closely, and we will continue to follow it. But we will just hope beyond hope that we see these come to market at a reasonable price. Of course, today there was some breaking news that Novo Nordisk stepped in. Do you guys remember the news that we brought you a couple weeks ago about Pfizer acquiring Metsera? Now, Metsera has these long-acting GLP-1s, like once a month GLP-1 injection, once a month amylin injection, perhaps combining these two. Metsera has some really interesting stuff. Pfizer went in and offered to buy the company. They were working through that deal to get it completed, and Novo Nordisk stepped in today and offered more money basically to Metsera to buy out Metsera. Of course, Pfizer's thrown a flag on the play, but of course, if Novo is successful and they're able to acquire Metsera, that preserves the duopoly in obesity medicine, which could be very interesting to patients. Of course, as a patient, we'd like to see this expand beyond the two main players in this, so that we have some more pressure on price, right? So that there's some more competition in the marketplace, and that we can see some more reasonable pricing in terms of the GLP-1 therapies. Let's talk a little bit about some of the other things that were discussed on this earnings call, including a little bit about retatrutide. So retatrutide, the triple agonist. There's also another triple agonist in the works in phase 1, but retatrutide is the one that's already in phase 3. We're actually going to have phase 3 trials to read out in 2026. It's actually an osteoarthritis. So there's a lot of caution. My prediction on this, again, I'm not a financial guy. I'm not an investment guy. So take this as educational purposes only, entertainment purposes only. But the interesting thing about retatrutide's first trial that reads out is that it's actually a trial measuring pain in people with osteoarthritis. So these people have osteoarthritis and obesity, but Wall Street is going to try to extrapolate information out of this data about the weight loss, but that's not how the trial was designed. The trial was designed to measure improvements in osteoarthritis. So it's possible that when the Triumph 4 data is reading out later this year, that retatrutide looks on paper to be a huge disappointment from weight loss. It's supposed to be better than tirzepatide, obviously. Perhaps it doesn't separate that much in this clinical trial, but I do believe we'll see in the further clinical trials. I think Wall Street needs to take a beat and take this information for what it is. It's specific to getting insurance to adopt retatrutide, which is Lilly made very clear on this earnings call that they plan to bring to the market as a specific therapy for people with let's call it like extreme cases of obesity or a lot of weight to lose or a lot of comorbidities, more advanced metabolic disease and dysfunction than somebody who tirzepatide or semaglutide might work just as well for. And so I think a couple things you can read into there, especially when you look at it in the broader landscape of Lilly suing the FDA to get retatrutide classified as a biologic. Of course, Lilly wants to have it classified as a biologic because they get 12 years of market exclusivity versus the 5, even though there's some interesting stuff going on with the FDA in the news the last couple of days about them working on biosimilars for biologics. But if Lilly is able to get retatrutide classified as a biologic, not only will they get longer exclusivity on the drug, but they will also command a much higher rate of charge. They'll be able to charge much more for retatrutide as a biologic than they would if it comes to the market as a simple peptide and GLP-1 triple agonist. So it'll be interesting to see how this all pans out, but it'll be interesting more so to me how the market responds to the first data that we get about retatrutide, because it's not simply an obesity weight loss trial. It's a trial designed to measure the actual pain of somebody living with osteoarthritis. And so it'd be interesting to see, but my sense is if that weight loss number comes in lower than, the 25, 26, maybe getting up to 27, 28% weight loss average, then Wall Street's going to do the same thing to the Lilly stock that they did to the Novo Nordisk stock with CagriSema, because CagriSema, of course, we've beat this into the ground, but the CagriSema data that read out in December, which led to a massive drop in the stock of Novo Nordisk, was simply because that trial was designed to not force dose escalate patients. So when you're comparing the weight loss with CagriSema to the SURMOUNT trials for tirzepatide, patients had to get to the maximum dose. They had to either get to 5, 10, or 15. And so that 22% weight loss was patients that had to go to the 15. There wasn't an arm of this study that you could compare exactly where patients had to get to the top dose. It was more of a tolerability thing. They wanted to keep people on the medication, and they wanted to design a trial that more accurately reflected the real world, where patients don't often get to the highest dose of these medications. How many of you are taking tirzepatide and you've never even touched and can't even fathom touching a 7.5 or a 10 milligram dose? So you've been on the 2.5 or the 5 and it's done just fine. So Novo Nordisk designed a trial to reflect the real world a little bit more, but then their stock got hammered because they didn't eclipse that 22% weight loss with tirzepatide. So will the markets react the same way to retatrutide when it comes to how Wall Street interprets the data from this osteoarthritis trial in retatrutide at the end of this year? All be very interesting stuff to watch, and we will cover it all very closely. Now, this is perhaps what was the most exciting thing to me and what I teased at the outset of this video. We learned that one of the early clinical trial phase 1 candidates that Lilly has going is called brenipatide. Now, it was previously listed in the R&D pipeline as a GLP-GIP coagonist. And it was like, what is this even, right? Why? And there's also, as I mentioned before, a triple agonist there too. But we got a name to it this time around on this earnings call, which is one of the main reasons we like to follow these earnings calls, because we learn something new every time. When we learned that brenipatide, a dual GLP-GIP, is in early studies for neurologic issues, right? So specifically, we're going to see early stage clinical trials for alcohol use disorder and opioid dependence. And the way it was kind of couched by the Lilly team is that they've learned that these drugs and this class of incretin mimetics has a profound impact on the dopamine release in the brain. And so in doing so, they have created a let's call it specially formulated GLP-GIP that is going to be specifically geared towards folks that may benefit from that mechanism of action, that dopamine release. changes that you see with GLP-GIP for use in alcohol use disorder and opioid dependence. So this is proof that the food noise pathway that we talk about here when it comes to tirzepatide and semaglutide. We talked about the new scale that that Roe put out in conjunction with Dr. Allison and a couple of others, and we know that this food noise pathway might also be like a craving pathway or a the same pathway where folks go and lean into alcohol or things like opioids. So that will be super fascinating to watch the development of this particular drug. And again, the name is brenipatide. We'll be following it closely at On the Pen. We also learned that next week at Obesity Week, we are going to get phase 2 readout on eloralintide, which is another molecule that we've been following for about a year and a half here at On the Pen. Eloralintide is Eli Lilly's amylin agonist that we could potentially see coupled with some of these drugs like tirzepatide in the future to increase the efficacy of tirzepatide. Of course, when we talked earlier about CagriSema from Novo Nordisk, CagriSema is a GLP-1 and amylin combination. You could see eloralintide from Lilly, which we'll get phase 2 readouts on next week at Obesity Week, or eloralintide combined with tirzepatide or even retatrutide in the future to help increase the efficacy for people facing severe metabolic disease. And so it'll be interesting to get that phase 2 data on eloralintide and hopefully some information on when we might see phase 3 trials start for that. We get a little bit better idea of when this may actually hit the market if approved. So huge quarter for Lilly, obviously, huge profits again, not slowing down there. The juggernaut and the clear leader in the obesity space. They confirmed that they're going to open 2 new manufacturing sites in the U.S. later this year that they'll announce. This in addition to the tens of billions of dollars worth of investment that Lilly's put in repatriating API, manufacturing these incretins here in the United States. And they're now running down really what amounts to its own end-to-end ecosystem from manufacturing to direct sales. We even saw an NVIDIA partnership this week, so AI-powered drug design. It is really insane to me how fast Lilly is rising to the top of not only its industry, but globally as the leader in drug innovation. And so Lilly's not just a pharma company anymore. It's an infrastructure company for metabolic medicine from the beginning to the end. And it is just a fascinating thing to have watched play out over the last couple of years as we've followed this very, very, very closely. So this was a very fascinating earnings call. We'll have a rundown a little bit later on our Substack. I hope that you'll check it out over there. You can get there by going to obesity.news, or you can go to otplinks.com, which will link you to all of the things that we offer in terms of savings for OTP listeners. We've got our partners over there at Shed. If you're looking for obesity care, we've got our partners at Integrated Peptides. If you're looking to add to your stack of peptides that you're taking for weight loss. We're also partnered with Shape'a, a scale company, the numberless scale claimable, who helps you get back on your branded medication if insurance denies it. We got some great partners over there with exclusive savings for listeners at OTP. So go to otplinks.com, check all that out. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for hanging out with me on this earnings call recap. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit all the buttons, share this with somebody who might find it beneficial. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe, because when you subscribe to our channel here, it really helps to get the word out about what we're doing here at On the Pen. And everything we do here is designed to help you have more competent and confident conversations with your doctor, so that at the end of the day, you have better health outcomes. So being armed with knowledge is power. And sometimes I even hear from people who are educating their own doctors on some of these pipeline medications, some of the new studies that are coming out, and just helping people get on and stay on these treatments to really hopefully at the end of the day eradicate this disease of obesity and put ourselves, our families, our country in a much better position. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being the best part of what we do, and we will catch you all on the next one.
Is it time to reimagine your future? The right business skills may make a difference in your career. At Capella University, we offer a relevant education that's designed to focus on what you need to know in the business world. We'll teach professional skills to help you pursue your goals, like business management, strategic planning, and effective communication. And you can apply these skills right away. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
AI agents are everywhere, automating tasks and making decisions at machine speed. But agents make mistakes. Just one rogue agent can do big damage before you even notice. Rubrik Agent Cloud is the only platform that helps you monitor agents, set guardrails, and rewind mistakes, so you can unleash agents, not risk. Accelerate your AI transformation at Rubrik.com. That's RUBRIK.com.